welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited for today's video. It's one I wanted to make sure I got in before the end of the year, and we are going to be revisiting my 2019 favorites. I wanted to do this video before we moved on to my 2020 favorites. So last year I did 19 favorites in 2019, so I'm going to be revisiting all 19 products with you guys today, letting you know if they're still favorites in my collection or if maybe I have possibly moved on with the relationship. You know, sometimes you just gotta get rid of the toxicity. So if you guys are interested in seeing my thoughts on my favorites from last year, then stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel, I would love if you would consider subscribing before moving on. We are posting every single day in the month of December. We love project painting, palette content, or just chit-chatting about makeup. So if that's something that interests you, I would love if you would subscribe. And other than that, let's move on with the video. It's early in the morning. My words aren't working. All right, my 2021 resolution is to be more unapologetically myself, but we're still in 2020, so I am allowed to make a disclaimer, as I always do. No making fun of me for my self-tanned hands. I know I could wear a mitt when I self-tan, but then I always have like super white hands, and how do you guys combat that? So last night I had the super white hands because I self-tanned without the mitt, and then I thought it would just be smart to just spray my hands with the spray. Like, can you see these fingers? Can you see these fingers? And this hand is literally more tan than my arm. We're struggling, but it's okay. Today's drink of choice, it is like 6:30 in the morning, so we're getting the first energy drink of the day in. It is Alani Nu, my favorite energy drink of all time. It's Alani Nu and Celsius, but I would choose Alani Nu if I could only choose one. And today we have my dog trying to jump on my lap. We have Cosmic Stardust. A little bit more sweet than some of the other flavors, so if you like a little bit more of a sweeter taste, I highly recommend Cosmic Stardust. Yeah. Clearly my dog wants some too. Okay, you guys, I want to start with I think there's 3 products that I don't have in my collection anymore. First is the Laura Mercier Illuminated Tinted Moisturizer. So I actually repurchased the Laura Mercier Tinted Moisturizer this year. I believe they reformulated, possibly just repackaged. Regardless, they did something with their formula, and I haven't been able to find the Laura Mercier Illuminating Tinted Moisturizer. If it still exists, please share a link to it down below, because I loved that. I ended up finishing that up this year, and I was super like sad when I finished it up because I haven't been able to find it. So that definitely would still be a favorite if I could get my hands on it, because I loved it till the last drop that I used this year, but unfortunately I can't find it anymore. And then speaking of Laura Mercier products, I also had the Laura Mercier concealer on my list, which I also finished up this year. And I will say, I think that the Kosas concealer is a better concealer, and I feel like more people would like the Kosas concealer because it does offer a little bit more coverage. But when I was making this list, I was like, oh yeah, the Laura Mercier concealer. I really missed that. So I went and added it to my Ulta cart for the next time I make an Ulta order, because I honestly do really enjoy that concealer, especially on days that my dog's chewing his bone super loudly now. I really enjoy that concealer, especially on days where I'm looking for not as full coverage. It's a super hydrating concealer, offers like light to medium coverage. So if you don't need a lot of coverage underneath your eyes and you're looking for a hydrating concealer, I really would recommend that. And I would still consider it to be a favorite because I am missing it and I want it back in my life. And then the last product that I no longer have is the Glow Recipe Watermelon Glow Mist. I have finished up either 2 of them this year, or I finished one up right at the end of 2019, and then I had another one in 2020. I would say that I like this spray and I would recommend it. My only problem with it is that it has a 6-month shelf life, and I feel like it's pretty true to that 6-month shelf life. Like, it starts to when you buy it, it's like this pretty baby pink color, and it really loses that color, and it just starts to smell a little bit like watermelon that's been sitting in your fridge for a little bit too long. So I have found some other like dewy mists that I really enjoy. I really like the Fenty What It Do mist. It's both mists, both the Fenty and the Glow Recipe, I enjoy because there are certain dewy mists out there where you can easily go a little bit too heavy-handed or too heavy-fingered, and you like all of a sudden just look like you just have like you possibly just dipped your head in the like oil fryer at McDonald's. Like, it can get a little bit out of control. The Pixi Glow Mist I used to love, and then one day I was driving to work, got to work, looked in the car mirror, which is just like, it's the tell-all It's the tell-all mirror, because you're sitting there in the natural light, you're looking in the car mirror, and thank goodness at this time I carried like an emergency bag with me, and I had makeup remover wipes.
What are you doing?
I'm filming. Oh great, it's about to get very chaotic in the household because now my not toddler's up, my 5-year-old's up. Frida told me she's gonna come a little bit later today to drop off your stocking stuff because it's gonna be a bigger thing in your stocking today. Frida's always elf on the shelf that brings her stocking stuffers every day. Where was I? Oh yes, the Pixie Glow Mist got a little too glowy sometimes for me. So what I loved about the Glow Recipe Spray is that I could spray quite a bit and it wouldn't be too much. But I really like the Fenty What It Do. There's also one from a brand I don't know how to pronounce their name. Is it Innisfree? Is that really just how you say it? They have one, the Cherry Blossom Glow Mist, which is like $18 to get a ton of spray. And that one, I didn't like at first. I was like, this is doing nothing for my glow. But if you shake it up really well, that'll also give you a nice glow. So while I would say that I think the Glow Recipe Spray is fine, I like the Glow Recipe Spray, it's just the shelf life for me that is really holding me back from spending the $28 on buying it again. So I don't think I'll own this one again. I wouldn't say it's not like, well, I would say it's not a favorite. It's just the shelf life. That's what I have to say. I included a skincare item in my 2019 favorites. I included the Summer Fridays Jet Lag Mask, and I would still consider this to be a favorite. This is not something I use every single week. In 2030, when we can hopefully travel again, this is something that I always have on hand for when I actually am on a jet plane, because it's super, super hydrating. So I feel like if I just pop this on right before a plane ride, it would have my back. Also, I typically tend to reach for this more in the winter time. I use it as an overnight sleeping mask. I know some people don't love this, but for me personally, I do really like this. I would still consider this to be a favorite, especially when you're in a pinch and just need something super hydrating. If you were taking like a road trip, if you were in the car for like 10 hours, this would be another great one. I did that back in February when we took a road trip, back when we could cross state lines and feel okay about it. Next up, I had one of my tried and trues. You guys know on this channel how much I love and adore First Aid Beauty primers, and last year I tried the Pores Be Gone primer for the first time. This is absolutely still a favorite of mine. This one is really nice and pore filling, but also still very hydrating. I talk about this all the time on my channel, so I won't drone on about it. I still love it. I mentioned 2 bronzers last year. I talked about the Fenty powder bronzer in the shade Into Sun. She has gone on to release cream bronzers this year. I still want to try but have yet to try. I would still consider this to be a favorite, but I just didn't reach for this one as much this year because I spent my whole year trying to self-tan and still haven't learned how to do it. And this is in the lighter shade. This is a perfect shade match for me when I am my fairest, and I really like this one because it is really buttery and smooth, really easy to blend and build on itself. Very hard to go heavy-handed, so I would still recommend this one. The other one that I mentioned as a favorite is my Cover FX Bronzing Duo. I have mine in the lighter of the 2 shades, which is in the shade Sunkissed Bronze. I was die hard over this last year. Oh my gosh, it's impossible to get anything done around here. I was die hard over this one last year, and I still really like this, but if I finish this, I am not sure I would replace it. So I don't know if I could consider this to still be a favorite, which I swear I have said like this will be like an all-time staple. So I feel like I'm eating my words here. I still think it's beautiful. I love the Charlotte Tilbury bronzer so much. And because I typically just reach for the matte side of this and don't usually even mix the two, let alone reach for this on its own, I feel like it's just not that good of a value for me to continue to repurchase. I still think this bronzer shade is beautiful, but I would no longer consider this to be an absolute favorite. And then speaking of the Cover FX duos, I also mentioned these 2 blush duos in my yearly favorites. One is in the shade Warm Honey. This is still a favorite. I still think this is beautiful. I like to wear this with just the matte. I like to mix them. And sometimes I will even just reach into this shade as like a really glowy blush in like the summer. This is something that I do not reach for as much in the summer. This is more of like a fall shade for me. But in the summertime, I absolutely love and adore the Soft Peach shade. Absolutely still a favorite. I do still recommend the Cover FX duos, especially if you're going to be using both sides. I think they are so beautiful, and the blushes for sure still favorites. Still really like the bronzer. I just don't think I'll repurchase when I finish it. And then obviously I mentioned Buxom Seychelles last year, and this is 100% still a favorite. This may still be my favorite blush in my entire collection. Like, it's just so beautiful. I don't know if it's even going to show up on my poorly bronzed hand. Yeah, you can kind of see that. It has the most beautiful satin sheen ever in a blush. I still really enjoy the other Buxom blush shades. I own 4 of these now, but Seychelles is just it for me. I just absolutely adore the beautiful nudie satin. Just, it makes me feel like a Victoria's Secret model who could even rock her like self-tanned hands on stage and feel like it ain't no thing. So this is really ironic because my highlighting preferences have changed so significantly this year. But last year I mentioned 2 highlights in my favorite. I mentioned the Pixi Glowy Gossamer Duo and the Persona. I would still say I definitely recommend them. And in terms of very blinding highlights, these would still be favorites of mine. However, I do prefer a more subtle, natural lip from within glow this year, and these are not so subtle. So here's the Pixi Glowy Gossamer Duo. I'm just going to swatch one side. It's super intense and super blinding. Super blinding. But if you like something that is going to really melt into your skin, you like a blinding highlight, and you like something that's going to look wet, it doesn't make the skin look textured in my opinion, just because it's such a thin powder. It really does just become one with your skin. So I do still recommend it. I do still like it on days that I am going for a blinding highlight. I just have not been reaching for a blinding highlight. And then also the Persona highlight in the shade Zuma. This is definitely more of a summer shade for me. It's a little bit dark for me when I'm not self-tan, but again, so blinding. But again, one of those sort of wet highlights that really just sits so beautifully on the skin. So I would consider these to be favorites in the blinding highlight category, but a blinding highlight just is not my favorite anymore. I did mention the Elsie concealer as a favorite last year in my favorites, and I actually would still consider this to be a favorite concealer as well. The only thing I don't love about this concealer is the way that you apply it. It has like a doe foot applicator, and it's just not my favorite way to apply, but this is something that I would repurchase when I finish this as well. I just think it is super hydrating. Again, underneath the eyes, this definitely is more full coverage than the Laura Mercier. So I think it offers a good amount of coverage, and I just think it looks like silky and beautiful underneath the eyes. So I would definitely still consider this one to be a fave. I mentioned a lip product. The only lip product I mentioned in my favorites was the Kopari Lip Glossy. I do really enjoy the Kopari Lip Glossy. I will say, so I've owned this shade, which is in Birthday Suit, which is like this nude kind of champagne shade. I'll put a little on right now so you can kind of see. I've owned this. I've owned Pinkini, which was like a bright, sheer bright pink. And then also the clear. For me, this is something I like to just wear kind of as I'm getting ready, just to like start to prep my lips for my lip products. It does feel nourishing on the lips and gives like a glossy glow, but for me, it's really kind of like a lip prep product. And I would honestly just go with the clear version going forward. I would still consider it a favorite, something that I will continue to own in my collection, but just the clear version, because I don't need my lips to look like they have a champagne glow when I'm getting ready. Like, I can just use the clear version. Still a favorite, just in the clear. And then the final product was a mascara, and it was the Milk Kush mascara. This is my 3rd tube still this year. I think I went through 2 other Milk Kush minis this year, and I finished one last year, so this is absolutely still a favorite. I will say I think I prefer the waterproof one, just because sometimes towards the end of the day I can get some transferring with the regular, but with the Milk waterproof there's no transfer. I also have really been enjoying, my favorite concoction is the Milk Kush with the NARS Climax. I just think that is like an unbeatable mascara concoction, but absolutely I would still consider the Milk Kush to be a favorite. Okay, I went to upload my footage onto my computer and realized I completely forgot to talk about the 4 palettes that I mentioned as favorites. So I'm coming back to talk about the 4 palettes. And let's start with the one that I would say is probably of the 3, the one I reached for the least in 2020, and that was the Tarte Unleashed palette. I still would say that I really like this palette. I tried and brought in a ton of new eyeshadow palettes and eyeshadow formulas into my collection this year, so between all of the new palettes that I brought in, as well as my Pan Luge eyeshadow series, which this palette never randomly was generated into that series, I just didn't reach for this as much as I did in 2019. I still really enjoy this palette. It's super blinding. I still really enjoy this palette. I love the color story. I love the formula, but I just didn't reach for it as much this year. The Jackie Aina palette from ABH, still an absolute favorite. The color story, the formula, everything about this palette is just chef's kiss, top notch. They did re-release this for the holidays this year, so you may be able to get your hands on this now if you missed out on it in the past, and I absolutely would recommend picking this up. You really cannot go wrong with this palette. I just adore this one. I also mentioned the Dominique Cosmetics Latte palette. I actually used this palette to create the look on my eyes today, and then I used some of the Juvia's Place Magic palette on my lower lash line. The lower lash line may have gotten smokier than anticipated, but it is what it is. I do still really enjoy this palette. This is another one that I didn't reach for as much this year as maybe I would have thought I would have, but again, just with how many new things I brought into my collection, it was hard to give everything the love it deserves, which maybe means I shouldn't have as much of a collection, but I just love trying new eyeshadows. I would still consider this a favorite though, and I would still recommend this, especially if you're looking for a more neutral palette, a more neutral wearable everyday palette. But the shimmers in this, they're so foiled and so metallic, like I always say, and then you do have your fun pops of color if you are feeling a little bit daring one day. So I would still consider this a favorite, as well as my Huda Mercury Retrograde. I absolutely just adore this palette. I recently picked up the Huda Naughty palette, which I've really been enjoying. This was the first larger palette from Huda I picked up, and then I picked up the Naughty palette, which I was really excited about. And then I also picked up the Desert Dusk palette when it was on sale for Black Friday, because now I feel like I just need to collect all of the Huda large palettes, even though I've always had sort of that collectionist mentality with the Huda Obsessions palettes, but I did declutter some of the Huda Obsessions this year because I just wasn't reaching for them like I once was. I absolutely would still recommend this palette. It is an absolute fave. If you like mauve tones, you can definitely get a neutral everyday look from this palette, but then you have your really, really, really fun colors that you can use to just really jazz up a look. Everything about this palette I just adore. It's such a fun palette. Highly recommend. Absolutely still a favorite. And with that, we'll get back to the end of this video. And after that, those were my 19 products. I hope I didn't miss anything. Those were my 19 favorites from 2019. Most of them still favorites, a couple parting ways with, but that's okay. I am really excited to share my new favorites. I probably will have more than 20 favorites this year, but I am really excited to share my 2020 favorites with you. Be on the lookout. That video should be coming towards the end of 2020. And now my dog and daughter really would like to come into my video to say goodbye to you guys. Alright, well, thanks for watching, you guys. I love you guys so much. I would love to know if your 2019 favorites are still your favorites. And thank you so much for sticking around to watch. See you in my next video. Bye. Weston, can you say bye? Can you say bye?
Bye.